Welcome back to the Growth Engine Marketing Podcast. In this episode, we look at a common misconception within the financial services industry. It's no secret that marketing departments are sometimes critically referred to as the colouring in department. And this label stems from the belief that marketing primarily involves making things engaging and visually appealing, rather than being a strategic, data-driven function that significantly influences a company's performance. So join us as we delve into the concept of the colouring in department, exploring its origins, discussing why it persists, and hearing from our previous guests to identify strategies for moving beyond this label. Let's start with Malcolm Fried, Chief Marketing Officer at 91. Malcolm is responsible for leading 91's global marketing efforts across investment marketing, brand, marketing operations, digital strategy, and corporate communications. Malcolm, thanks so much for coming down, agreeing to have a chat, coming on the podcast. When we set up this podcast originally, the reason for setting this up was that I've been working in marketing in financial services for a number of years, and I kept coming across this disparaging term of marketing as the colouring in department.
Right. Yes.
I think that is pretty disrespectful to the quality of the individuals that are working in the department. And just to kick us off, I just wanted to ask if you've ever come across that term yourself, and what you think of that.
I have come across that term, and I hear it when I go to conferences.
Yes.
And I hear lots of agonizing about it. And I do have a view on that term, and here it is. Here we go. I should think that term, in my experience, having heard my colleagues, is used in at least two ways, or for two reasons. One reason is because we, as marketers, if we're called that, haven't shown what we can actually do. We haven't earned the right to be known as more than colouring in specialists. And the other reason may be that in certain firms which are not marketing-led, for example, financial services, there is just an inherent misunderstanding or insufficient appreciation for what marketing can and should do. We should actually own this problem. It's no good complaining that we're known as colouring in specialists. You've got to earn the right not to be known as a colouring in specialist at non-marketing-led organizations. If I'm working for a luxury fashion brand, which is marketing-led, or a whiskey brand, which is probably marketing-led or led by somebody who has a keen appreciation for marketing, it is unlikely that that firm would use a derisory or dismissive term for its marketers.
Sure.
If I'm working for a nuclear power station or an investment manager where most of my colleagues do not understand marketing, and nor should they, there's no reason why they should, I think it's my obligation to show what marketing can do and the value it can add, and get rid of that label. So, when colleagues say, woe is me, why are we called colouring in specialists? I'd say, own the problem for the most part. Own it and fix it.
Yeah. It reminds me of a book that I'm reading by a guy called Shane Parrish called Clear Thinking. He writes a blog called Farnham Street, fantastic blog. And he mentions in there, if you've got a criticism, take ownership of it. If you don't take ownership of it, you're never going to hope to solve the problem itself. So accepting responsibility initially is the starting point. You talk about industries which are marketing led, but you implied, I think, that investment management can't be marketing led or aren't marketing led.
Let me explain what I mean by that. Typically, at the head of an investment management company, you would not find a former marketer.
No. Okay.
You would find a former portfolio manager, or you'd find a former head of sales and distribution, probably, or somebody who has moved from one of those areas to the other. What you'd be unlikely to find is a former CMO, for a lot of very good reasons. It's a highly technical industry that requires a very deep product and environmental knowledge. So you're unlikely to find that former CMO. CMO or a marketer should know a great deal about product, price, place, promotion.
Yeah.
But in the course of that person's career, they will unlikely have been able to acquire sufficient knowledge of portfolio management because they won't be doing it. They won't be running money.
Sure.
Or large sales and distribution. That's what I mean.
Yeah, okay.
I don't mean a market is forbidden from leading that company. There may be examples, and there may be some very good examples, but they'd be the exception.
Yeah. I wonder if that's the current status now, but I did read of a head of distribution for a global asset manager that are changing. Their view was that the nature of distribution now is changing, and that actually sales and marketing are becoming much more entwined.
Yeah.
And that they're changing head of distribution to head of client experience.
Yeah.
So I wonder if in time, 10 years down the line, actually maybe you will get people that are starting to take that more.
I guess, we do see that model where, and I know it's a debate that comes in ebbs and flows, should marketing and sales be in the same, if you like, bucket?
Yeah.
Should they be led by the same individual? Should they be combined? Some think yes, some think no. To me, it makes perfectly good sense to have client group, which is led by a distribution specialist, part of which is marketing. And that is my firm. I'm very comfortable in that space. What we don't have is a combined sales and marketing team.
Okay.
Sales works with marketing. It's not combined with marketing. It's not the same team.
If we talk about 91 now and the structural setup there, I believe you work hand in hand with the CCO.
So the CCO is my boss. The Chief Commercial Officer is my boss. The group I work with pretty closely would be the client group MDs, the heads of each regional area, the heads of UK, US, Asia Pac, South Africa, etc. So that's a model where I, as the head of marketing, work most closely with the heads of the regional distribution teams.
Okay.
And our joint boss is the Chief Commercial Officer, whose boss in turn is the CEO.
Okay. And then under you've got a team of about 70?
About 70 people. Most of us operate with a global remit. We're about a third of us are in Cape Town. Most of the rest of us are in London. We all work on global work. So wherever we sit regionally, we work on global work. Okay.
We know that they don't do colouring in.
No, we don't. Look, I think the colouring in, if we can get back to that, because it's a thing. It's a thing with marketers. It upsets us sometimes, and it shouldn't. If we just try and define what colouring in is, we can just dial back to those 4 Ps that we operate with. Okay, it's not product. It's not price. It's not place. It's part of promotion, and one suspects it's that corner of promotion that is occupied with visual identity and advertising comms. That's the colouring in bit. That's important, and it's not everything. I should think it occupies half of one day a month for me. But that half of one day is important, and we paid careful attention. But it's certainly not the predominance of what we do.
No, but
it's not.
It's probably the visible aspect which is surface to the
this
world.
Is right.
Which is,
And where we run into the thicket is when we pay too much attention to it and aren't commercial enough about it. I think so. If we create inadvertently or deliberately a perception that the colouring in or the visual identity and comms is the predominance of what we do, and we aren't being commercial about the other 3.5 Ps, we create for ourselves a problem. Because then genuinely, a colleague will say, why are you spending so much time on creating a set of comms, a set of above-the-line retail ads, when you could be devoting 18 days to doing a deep piece of original research that will result in a white paper that our clients could really read. I think that's where we need to own that and try and avoid that problem.
Don't open yourself up to criticism, really, I guess.
Just, kind of be commercial, add value. I think our attitude is people in the business first and marketers second. If we have that approach, that forces us to be commercial about what we do. If we see ourselves as marketers and nothing else, we run the risk of being the colouring in people, or the people who are disconnected from the business.
Okay, so be commercial. Can you unpack that more for me?
Yeah, sure. So it requires a couple of things first, a few things. One is to understand how we make a living, to be numerate.
Yeah.
Internally, to figure out what it is that lets the firm succeed and what it is that holds up success. To be able to do such things as read and understand an income statement, to understand how our colleagues, the PMs, build their businesses, to appreciate how the products are structured, what goes into the strategies, really deeply to understand the business. That's number one. In order to aspire to being commercial, that's number two. On the other side of the equation, to understand what clients want and need. As marketers, we should be doing that. And we feel if we can get that right, really deeply understand what we do for a living and how we do it well, understand what clients want and need, it lets us prioritize what we're doing well. Absent that understanding, I'm not sure any marketer can go about their work effectively, because how would you have a priority list? How would you know what to do first? Or how would you know how to clear your day or your week?
Well, welcome back. We now move on to Leanne Barnum, Global Head of Marketing at Brooks Macdonald, who has more than 15 years in investment management and has a deep knowledge of marketing in this sector. I'm interested to just touch on the research elements. You're saying that you did a lot of research when you were at Architas, and I think you said as well that you've been conducting research at Brooks. So how does that process work for you? Do you focus groups, individual depth interviews with existing clients, not existing clients?
Yeah.
What's the word? Potential clients? How does that work?
We've done it a number of different ways, and I think it's depending on what you're trying to do. So I think at the point where with Architas, so we had a very clear objective. We wanted to be in the top 3 multi-managers over 2 years. So we were much more punchy.
Yeah, right.
And it was like, how do we do that? So we went out, we worked with external research experts. So it wasn't something we tried to conduct ourselves. We spoke to 250 advisor firms, not necessarily ones that dealt with us. So we gave them some of our clients to contact, but equally we wanted people that didn't work with us, because we really wanted to understand, one, what's the challenges you see just generally, and two, what's the challenges you see with working with Architas, or the opportunities, so that we could really, take it to that next level. And then we carried on that research. And so the objective of that kind of initiative was to raise Architas's brand. We weren't really known as a standalone brand in the UK, because we'd always distributed through AXA and partnerships with AXA as a platform, which was Elevate at the time. So from that perspective, we did this. That was our marker in the sand to say, these are the challenges. This is where I think we can see a niche for Architas to play in. If we can find that sweet spot where we're providing this support to advisors at the points where they need it, I think we can carve out a niche for ourselves here. Then from a brand perspective, we were like, where are we on the brand scores? What's our recognition like at the moment? Who's working with us? Who's not, etc. And then we did research every 6 months. And that was our measurement of, are we successful in what we're trying to achieve?
Going in the right direction.
Yeah. And so by doing that every 6 months, we could see, were we going in the right direction? If we weren't, what did we need to tweak and change? And we achieved that objective. Actually, we went to number 1 multi-manager in the UK. Which
Congratulations.
Score.
Yeah.
And then from the Brooks perspective, and what we're doing at the moment is we're trying to understand more about, what do people know of Brooks? So I think there's a, I wouldn't call it a misconception, but there is a preconception that Brooks are just a DFM. But it actually, we've got a funds arm, and we've got a much wider proposition than perhaps people might know us for.
Right.
So it's, how do we have that conversation around, actually we can be more than just bespoke portfolio services to you, or managed portfolio services. So we've done research with existing clients, lapsed clients, and also prospects.
Right.
And those have been in-depth phone interviews. So we were very grateful to the fact that people were willing to give up 30, 40 minutes of their time to take part in this. But we got some great insights out of it, and it's going to really help us shape how we go forward. I'm actually presenting it to the Exco tomorrow. So.
Oh, fascinating. And similar numbers when we're...
So that was, I think we did around 150. So we broke it into those 3 channels: the UK investment management, the international business, and the private client business. And then it's really interesting what you see come out of that as well. And in that, where we say international, it's servicing of expats in kind of English-speaking countries. So you actually find that the challenges that they're facing, although there will be local nuance, and they're probably more concerned around tax than perhaps a UK investor is, or different tax challenges, actually how they want to be serviced, how they want to interact with a brand, what they want from you, is actually very similar. So the jurisdiction is probably less of an issue than perhaps we might have thought. Similar on the intermediary side, same kind of challenges they're having with servicing clients, etc. So I think we're going to have some really useful insights come out of that will, again, feed into this overall growth ambition.
Yeah, fascinating.
And a lot around what do people actually want to hear from you. So there's a lot of appetite for increased communication rather than less, but just in different formats than perhaps they've been receiving previously, and not just from us, but from competitors as well. So I think that will really help us hone. So once we've got the data piece all in one place,
it's almost like the part 2 that you come onto. It's giving you the insights to shape what that is going to be as part of the marketing lead nurturing program.
And we can't be so, I don't know if feign's the right term, but to make these assumptions that this is what people want. I'm always like, I think in every marketing budget you should have a good carve out for research, and you should be constantly testing and iterating what you're doing.
So otherwise you just assume and
exactly. And then you're relying on the metrics that you get from the interactions. If you've emailed it out, what's your click-through rate like? But that doesn't really tell you anything. It will just tell you whether it's resonating or not. It won't tell you how you evolve it and take it to the next level. So for me, I think research is super important.
Yeah. I want to bring it back to brand and brand awareness. We've talked a lot about data and digital. But of course, we know that there's another side to marketing, which is the creative side of it. What is your role in developing out the brand awareness of Brooks? What is the Exco's view on the importance of brand? Is there anything you can share?
Brand's always a challenge because it can be quite intangible. So when you're having conversations about how much an ad campaign might cost, and it's like, well, what am I going to get out of that? And I think it can be quite crude to be like, well, unless I'm going to be able to, demonstrate X amount of leads have come off the back of this, then I don't see any value. And I think those are the kind of conversations that need to be overcome sometimes. Of some things are just quite intangible. Some things just you measure differently. So brand awareness, I think, sometimes can be a bit of a, how do you calculate that? But it's anecdotal as well, because again, brand's really important because people aren't going to trust a brand that they don't know. No. So you might, if you're a private client, you've come through an intermediary, you trust your intermediary, so therefore you're quite happy to. And I'm sure there's quite a few high street investors who won't know who some of the big names are in the asset management industry, but they might go through an advisor. If they made that recommendation, they trust their advisor. I think from an advisor perspective, brand awareness is really important, and we've seen that come through this recent piece of research as well. It's like, I know Brooks or I don't know Brooks. If I don't know Brooks, why are they not doing more to work on their brand so that I know more about them?
Yeah. That in itself is like, well, there you go. Read that.
And this again, comes back to demonstrate the value of research. So I think brand is super important, but it's doing it in the right way. It's making the most of that budget spend on brand. So it's not perhaps... there's been some really successful brand campaigns that have been, wrapping taxes, but if you've got the budget to do that and the luxury to be able to go, do you know what, we can dedicate this amount to brand. A lot of brands need to make that brand spend work much harder.
Yes.
So it's how do you raise the brand awareness, but also associate it with something where you can actually add a bit more context to it, in the sense of, you've got that really strong call to action, or you can really get the message through whilst you're raising the brand awareness. And that's what we're looking at. And that's where I think the role of content really comes in as well. So
I've got in my mind the I'm sure you know it, the Burnett and Peter Field diagram showing the importance of brand building combined with short-term sales activation. And I think Mark Ritson talks about a bothism approach. That's my view, but it sounds like that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and and I'm sure many will agree, there is no one kind of facet of marketing or sales that is going to be 100% effective. It is a collaborative effort, right? Yeah. You can have the best brand, but if you don't have the right distribution people to then go and close it, that's going to fall down. You can have the best salespeople, but if no one knows who you are, they're going to have to work double, triply hard to get that person over the line. So that real collaboration through distribution and marketing is where it's really important. I think it has come a long way in the time that I've worked in the industry. I think we're moving away from marketing being the colouring in department, and we're actually getting to a point where there's an understanding, or there's they're witnessing the value that marketing can bring when marketing works really well.
We're now joined by Rachel Smith, Head of Marketing, EMEA and Vice President at Dimensional Fund Advisors. Rachel is also the Financial Services Forum Marketeer of the Year 2023. And her career spans several high-profile organisations where she has demonstrated her exceptional skill in driving growth and innovation within marketing. You're now in Dimensional. You mentioned that you've got a team that's spanning across EMEA, and you're also the head office is over in Texas. Can I ask you how you've structured your team at Dimensional?
Absolutely. So as mentioned, we've got a global team. So we have a lot of work coming out globally, a lot of global content that we can leverage, which is brilliant. We've got plenty of things that we can utilize here. I think one of the things we need to think about in region is we're smaller, and we have to wear quite a few different hats. So one of the things that I do think about when I'm structuring the team is, what does the business need right now? My business in region, but also globally as a department, we also have to think about skill sets that fit within our global department.
Okay.
So what does the business need right now, and what might it need mid to longer term? And they're not always the same thing, but you're trying to plan for the future while also meeting the immediate need. So that's really important. So for me, people who can wear multiple hats, who are quite comfortable with change and ambiguity, because we're often working on things we've not worked on before. So just figuring out how to get it done, understanding how to navigate a global environment. So working with your global colleagues, which is cross time zone often, and then being able to leverage our global material and our global content for the region. So knowing what our regional needs are, while still getting as much juice from the squeeze from our global team as well. So I think that's really important, someone who can navigate both of those things. And then skill set, when we're thinking structurally across the team, it's not just that kind of being able to navigate change, it's understanding the teams you need to work with to get things done. So just like you mentioned, being a people person, marketing interacts with all the teams across the business. And at Dimensional, in our EMEA office, we're all on one floor. So that interaction is very easy. We're wandering around the floor and talking to people, but marketing's one of the teams I think that interacts most frequently with the majority of the business. So people who can do that stakeholder management piece is also really important. Yeah.
And you talking about working with different parts of the business, obviously marketing and sales side by side. You looking at your LinkedIn profile earlier this morning, you've consistently kind of bridged the gap between marketing and sales. And sometimes I think in perhaps years gone by, that hasn't always been a easy relationship. I think it's fair to say now marketing and sales are much more cohesive and realize that the way that digital marketing especially is going, that they can actually support each other. But it hasn't always been that way, has it?
No. I mean, I like to claim I'm only 21, but I've clearly got a few more years experience under my belt. When I first started, there were certain organizations, absolutely not all of them, where marketing had started as the one need, and that one need might be graphics or some sort of presentation design. And often the team would be referred to as the graphic department. And I would go in and somebody would ask where the graphics department was. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, who's the graphics department? And then my team would be like, that's us. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
because that's
Also
such
called the colouring in
the
department.
colouring in department. And it's such an old school term, I think. And I don't think it's come from any bad place. I think it's come from the original need to have one person, and that one person was maybe doing the graphical element. And then the team grows, but the name doesn't disappear. So I think we're much further along than we were then. I mean, at Dimensional, as I mentioned, we all sit together. So sales and marketing sit right next to each other. If we want to ask each other anything, we can just wander over and have that conversation. So it does lead to a very collaborative environment. I think the other benefit is we are aligned on our priorities. So, the business priorities are the priorities of the sales team, and that's also the priorities of the marketing team. So that alignment, I think, is very important because we're all pulling in the same direction. And I feel very strongly that the marketing team will input to business growth as well as the sales team will input to business growth. And if the two teams can work together really well, then they will be greater than the sum of their parts. That's what I think we are aiming for, and we are a lot more further along that journey than we were maybe 20 years ago.
The rise of data now within marketing, again, is not something that was perhaps there at the beginning of your career. And how have you kind of evolved with managing that and utilizing that as a resource that can give that sales intelligence into teams?
The data piece is really interesting. And I think a lot of it has come from the move into more digital marketing. Obviously, digital marketing's been around for a long time, but maybe financial services haven't been at the forefront of some of that digital innovation. And what comes with digital is data. Data that you can really understand what people are looking at, in what formats, what content is working, what topics, how long people are staying on a page or watching a video. So the data has become really important to get some of that client insight. And the trick is harnessing the marketing data and then being able to join it up with the sales data to get a really good view of a client experience or a prospect experience, because I think both need to have a good experience with your brand and your organization. And if we can join the dots up between all the data that we've got coming in, and it's not just sales and marketing, there's data coming in from events, there's data coming in from other teams. If we can join those dots up, I think it makes you better able to meet your clients where they are, because you understand what they're looking at, what they're interested in, and how you can improve that user journey for them.
When you started your role at Dimensional, how far along was you was it there? Did it have that? Did you come in and have to set that up, or?
I think we had elements of it. So Dimensional has always been a digital first from a marketing perspective, but equally we're mindful.
Is that globally it has been?
Globally, we are digital first, but we've also been mindful that we have a mixture of clients. In the same way, everybody likes to digest content differently. So I am always on my mobile phone. I digest content on my mobile or my iPad, ideally. But equally, I like to print off some content if I want to make notes on it. And I think we have a lot of clients that like to do a bit of both. So I think the important thing is to have really good content that really hits the mark for your clients and their end clients, because we are B2B. So we have the our interactions, and then we have to be mindful of our clients, end clients.
Because they're more likely sharing that directly with their clients as well.
Absolutely. So it's 2 layers of communication. It's making sure that communication is tailored to that audience, but then also that you can utilize that in many different formats. And I think when I said Dimensional is rich in content, we really are rich in content. So then our ability to push that content out into different mediums, to package it up into digital and also into formats that may not be as digital if people want to print something off, for example. I think that's the most important thing when you're thinking about bringing that digital element in, is we're still in a world where people digest in different ways, and you have to cater. You have to cater for all of that.
Thank you for tuning in to the Growth Engine podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episodes featuring our insightful marketeers, head over to hubagency.co.uk. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.